All right, we're on to lesson number 2, and our big idea continues to be formulas can be used to determine the perimeter of polygons, the area of rectangles, and the volume of rectangular prisms. Today we are talking about area of rectangles. So let's take a look at this rectangle, and what is the area of this rectangle? How did you find out? Well, up till now, you've probably been doing a fair bit of counting of the squares, because remember, what does area measure? Area measures the shape in the space, inside the shape. So all of this space taken up inside of a 2D shape, a flat shape. That's area. And often we find it by counting the number of squares. There is another way to do that, and I'll show you. One of the ways that we can find area is we can go area equals length times width. And if you think of your basic facts, and when we draw arrays, this is exactly what this is. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across, and 1, 2, 3, 4 down, 6 rows of 4, 6 groups of 4 is 24. And that is also our area. And if we were to count all of these squares, we would know that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That is our area, the amount of shape that is filled, the amount of space that is inside this shape. All right, so let's look at a few examples. So as we said, we can find a shortcut for calculating the area, and that is to find the length times the width. And again, I would suggest you go A equals length times width when you are writing your formulas. This way you can remember this is an area formula and not a perimeter formula or a volume formula when we get to it. So do write the A. All right, so we're measuring the length of this rectangle. We've realized that it is 12 centimeters long and it is 6 centimeters wide. So that means it would be 6 rows of 12. You would do 6 times 12. 6 times 12 is 72. So the area is 72 centimeters squared. What that really means, that little 2, that squared, is that we are looking at the number of squares that fill in this shape. So if we were to look at this and we were to count all of the number of squares, if they were all drawn in there, that's how many squared centimeters there would be. So centimeters that are 1 square on each side, that's how many there would be. There would be 72 centimeters squared. You must write it with this little 72, this little centimeters with a 2, and when you're writing it, it should not look like this. Okay? That 2 is smaller and it is above, and that's what that should look like. Make sure that you're adding the squared to the units. And again, area is finding out how many squares that are 1 centimeter on each side fit into that shape. Okay? Our formula for that, which I already told you a little bit about, is length times width. So we look at the length and we look at the width. Area equals length times width is the formula. And again, that is the only difference between grade 5 and grade 6. So you are expected to know and write and use the formula. And again, length times width, because we are really figuring out the number of rows, the number of rows of the length that are the width. So there are 12 rows here of 6. Often your basic facts can really help you with finding your area. Thinking of your arrays, that could assist you. Okay. And again, in grade 6, remember, it's only rectangles that we're responsible for. Mind you, a square is a type of rectangle. So if this were my square, and it was 4 here and 4 here, I would still use that length times width formula, because 4 times 4 is 16. We're going to assume they're centimeters squared. And if we were to have 4 rows of 4, we would end up with 16 squares. Okay, so for formulas, your rectangle formula works for squares as well, because squares in actuality are a type of rectangle. All right, finishing off with one more example. So here we have Edmund who built a dog crate for his dog. The floor of the crate is a rectangle. The dimensions of the floor are 80 centimeters by 120 centimeters. So that's what the bottom rectangle shape looks like. What would be the area of that? We would again multiply the length times the width, 120 times 80. And we, of course, can use a calculator in this unit. In case I haven't said already, you're more than welcome to use a calculator. But do remember that you have to show this work and show your final answer. And your final answer should have units squared when you are doing area. So we would multiply 120 times 80. We would end up with 9,600 centimeters squared as the area of his crate. All right, now you get to do some practice. So again, remember, you need to show the formula, the work, the answer with units. Okay? All of those things need to be in your answers all along while you're doing the practice, so that you are prepared for it. You know what it's going to be like when you do the actual concept practice and the work from your textbook. So go ahead and press pause, use your calculator, but make sure on your sheet that you are writing down the formula, the work, the answer, including the units. Go ahead and press pause and try those now. All right, let's start with the first one. So again, our formula is area equals length times width. Should have the A there as well. So then area equals 6.8 or 6 8/10 times 10.2 or 10 2/10. And you're going to type that into your calculator because we haven't even done multiplying two decimal numbers. 6.8 times 10.2 is how you would type that into your calculator. Your answer would be 69.36 or 69 36 of a centimeter squared is how that answer should look. Take a look at yours. Let's take a look at the second one, and it's actually a square, but remember for area that doesn't change anything. It's still length times width. So our area then is 32 times 32. 32 times 32 is 1,024, and this is now meters, so be careful, be aware of what your units are. Meters squared. Go ahead and check yours. Last one is again a rectangle. Oops. Area equals length times width. So area equals 108 times 62. And remember, in reality, it doesn't matter if you've switched these around and made this your length and this your width, because of the commutative property for multiplication. We can multiply these in this order, or we could multiply them in the other order, and we're going to end up with the same answer. Remember, that's the commutative property for multiplication and addition. It does not work for division and subtraction, but in this case, you can change that order up, and it's really not going to make a big difference. So area equals then 108 times 62. Which would be 6,696, and it's millimeters now, being aware of my units, and it's squared because it's squared millimeters. It's little squares that have a millimeter side length and a millimeter side width that would cover that shape. Wow, that's a lot of little squares that would cover that shape. So again, as you can see, for rectangles and squares, our formula is always area equals length times width. All right, you are moving on to your concept practice. And again, as already stated, you need to have the formula. That's the only difference between grade 5 and grade 6. Otherwise, I'm going to have to say that you're at grade 5 level for area. You must show your work. You're welcome to use a calculator. You must have the units. And they must be squared. Okay, so be careful when you're doing your work. You are working on page 233, 234, numbers 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 are the questions that you're working on. 1, 2, 3, 6, and 10. Away you go. As you're working, if you have any questions, please remember to ask. All right, and here's your textbook pages for those of you that have forgotten your textbook. Here's 1 and 2. And there's 3. Here's 4 to 7, 8 to 10, and the reflect prompt. Again, remember as you're working, if you have any questions, that you please remember to ask.